Hello and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today on the topic of how ESA's 4DEE initiative is transforming ecology education and workforce preparation on campuses. If you just joined us, it'd be wonderful if you could add your name and affiliation in the chat box so we can get familiar with one another. For those of you who are new to me, my name is Jessica Johnston. I am an education programs manager at the Ecological Society of America, tuning in today from my home office in Maryland, just outside of DC, and I'm going to be your host for the duration of this session. I have a few very special guests in the room with me, and I will invite them to briefly introduce themselves and their involvement with 4DE in just a moment. But before I do that, I wanted to cover some quick housekeeping rules. So today's session is meant to be an informal discussion centered on what the 4DE framework can do for you, your faculty, your networks, your students, and we welcome your ideas and thoughts on this in two different ways. You can either use the chat box option and you can contribute comments anytime during the session, or you can raise your digital hand by using the reaction items listed in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Once you raise your hand, we will call on you to unmute your mic. If you haven't been called on, we please ask that you mute your mic at all other times to avoid feedback. And also, this session is being recorded today. Okay, so now that we have the housekeeping stuff out of the way, first up, I would like to thank you and welcome ESA's very own Executive Director, Dr. Catherine O'Riordan, for joining us today. Kathy, the floor is yours. You want to say hello?
Hi, everyone, and welcome. It's very exciting to be able to just have this informal conversation with all of you. ESA has really been dedicated to this field of ecology education for many, many years. I think that, and this particular idea has been brewing over 30 years. Many different volunteers, you'll meet a few of them today, have been involved in the formation of the framework. Going back, I think it was 5 years ago, the ESA Board of Directors endorsed the framework, and ever since then, we've been, trying to do new, innovative things to push it out and get it further adopted. So we have a subcommittee, a standing subcommittee of our education committee. It's the 4DEE subcommittee, and you'll be hearing from the chair, Chris Beck, in just a few minutes, and they're overseeing this implementation. The broader ESA community has been fairly receptive. Obviously, we're trying to get the word out to as many people as we can. We do have some support from National Science Foundation to support this effort and to create more of a network and a community of practice. So we'll hear a little bit about that. So I'll stop there and welcome, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Great, thanks, Kathy. Okay, so how about we hear from Chris Beck, Dr. Chris Beck, professor at Emory University and the current chair of the 4DE subcommittee.
Hi, all. Thank you all for coming. I know some of you are familiar with 4DEE, but for others of you, it might be new. I just wanted to give a very high-level overview of the framework, and we can discuss in more detail during our discussion time. So the framework describes 4 dimensions for ecology education. So that's ecology concepts, and these are the traditional concepts that we think about in a foundational ecology course. Ecology practices, cross-cutting themes, and those cross-cutting themes reflect the cross-cutting themes in the Vision and Change document. And then finally, human-environment interactions. So those are the 4 dimensions. And then the other key aspect of this framework is we're really thinking about how students can integrate across those dimensions, and how as faculty we teach students to think about how these different dimensions interact with one another. So I'll leave it at that high level, but if you have specific questions about the framework, we can talk about it during the discussion period.
Great, thanks, Chris. And now we will turn to my employer extraordinaire, Teresa Murad, who is the Director of Diversity and Education Programs at ESA, and also is the principal investigator of an NSF grant that is tied directly to this 4DE framework. So Teresa, the floor is yours.
mute myself. Okay, there we go. I hope you can see this. I'm gonna put the slides so you can be big. All right, great.
Looks
Okay,
great.
so the NSF funded project that Kathy mentioned earlier is titled Transforming Ecology Education to 4D. And I'll be sharing a couple of slides on a network survey that we conducted earlier this year. But first, I want to acknowledge some very important people. So here is a list of all the current subcommittee members of the 4D that overseeing the 4DEE, and you've already met Chris, and you'll meet some of the people on the list here today as well. And this is a subcommittee of the Education Committee, which is chaired by Tom Langen at Clarkson. Then the NSF project also has its own steering committee. Jessica mentioned that I'm the PI, and I want to introduce George Middendorf also, who is the co-PI on this project. And then again, you'll see some of the same names from the subcommittee also involved in this project, plus a few others that we pulled into this project to help us expand our scope. So again, to share a few results from the evaluation, here are some of the questions that we asked. What was done by the network during 22-23? So the funding was received only in fall of 2021. So it just kind of took us a little bit of time to get ramped up, and really the activities that are being evaluated are only for about a year, right? So we're just getting started. So we were asking things like, how well those activities were carried out, and who is better off due to participating. And this is an evaluation conducted by an external partner, Measurement Resources Company. So just for some numbers here, who are the people who were in our network? We actually reached out to more than 2,500 in the network of people who have given us their names through various sources. For example, participating in web events like this. But the respondents for the evaluation were pretty small, only 101 respondents of 4%. But, I think they were a really good cross-section of people. So you can see that most of them do teach undergraduate biology or ecology. 50% were tenure track, and 57% taught for more than 10 years. So that was a bit of a surprise for me personally, because sometimes we think that these innovations are maybe more attractive to the younger faculty, but we are getting good participation. So, and you can see also we are getting a 10% participation from community colleges, which is really, really nice to see. And of course, we do expect most of the, a good number of participants from our usual four-year institutions with the graduate programs in biology. Right. So these are some of the activities that we did over the last year. The primary one would be the faculty mentoring networks, and we had 2 cohorts of those, total of 23 participants. And then the rest were mostly web events or workshops or conferences. Okay. And then in terms of resources, here are the types of resources that we were able to offer. Most of them are teaching resources in the EcoEd library, or informational resources online, or videos, or information through our education newsletter. So we asked our participants, as a result of those resources I mentioned, or of the activities, what has happened, right? What kind of outcomes did they feel were an impact for them? And so as you can see, most of them really improved their understanding of 4DEE. 74% improved their ability to integrate 4DEE into teaching. 64% also connected with participants outside other professors in their field, and then another 49% actually said that they expanded their networks outside of ecology, but related to ecology. So that was quite an interesting result. And on the sidebar there, 60% of the respondents said they actually used at least one resource or participated in one activity. So this was a good feedback for us, because 40% of them, told us that they have not used any of the resources or participated in an activity, but we were looking at the feedback as well. So it's kind of interesting to see what they will have to say. Now, as far as then the people who did participate, so 37% said they had at least one research project informed by 4DEE. So that's pretty incredible too. And then 73% of the participants modified at least one education course. So we were really encouraged by the initial response. As far as the faculty mentoring networks, and you can see really nice numbers there, 88% felt that they improved their ability to implement 4DE as a result of participating in the network and to communicate the framework to others. And 94% felt respected. They felt that they were able to participate fully. So yeah, so I just want to stop there. This is just a picture of a group at our Life Discovery Education Conference where we also promoted the 4D education framework. Back over to you, Jessica.
Okay, thanks, Teresa. Yeah, so that's a quick overview of the NSF grant. We can dive into it a little bit more. And this is the part where we go into the discussion phase. The next person, or the person who will be kind of leading this discussion, is Dr. Ken Klemow, who's an Emeritus Professor and Department Chair of Biology and Earth System Science at Wilkes University, and is one of the architects of the 4DE framework. There's a couple architects in the room, but Ken is definitely one of them. So Ken, maybe a brief intro, and then let's dive into the discussion. I'm curious to see what people have to say.
Okay, thank you very much. So as was said before, 4DEE is a framework that really has emerged over the course of 30 years of discussion among ecologists, trying to figure out how do we tackle this whole question of ecological literacy that was put forward to us by Paul Risser back, I believe, in 1986. And so we've had several iterations of what is the best way to be teaching ecology. And so based on the feedback that we've gotten from different focus groups, we've actually come up with this 4DEE framework. So the question is, what do we want to do today? And today we have administrators from various schools and also various programs. And essentially, we're trying to, I guess, raise consciousness in terms of what 4DE is and trying to get more people to adopt it. But then conversely, we are looking for feedback on 4DEE and what we could do to improve it. Basically, there's a literature that's developed on 4DEE. It seems that every month we see another article that mentions 4DEE as part of how we go about teaching ecology. And then certainly at the annual meetings of the Ecological Society, we see more and more sessions and papers that are devoted to the 4DEE framework. So the point then is that we have early adopters of 4DEE. The early adopters generally have been very excited about it. And in fact, one of the things that as I know I've spoken with people and other people have spoken with others, that faculty are actually, if they're not already doing 4DEE, as was described by Teresa, they're very close. They might be missing, one or two dimensions. And so what we want to do, again, is to hear from administrators in terms of what you all think about this 4DEE framework, and then how as you as administrators can support the development of faculty who are looking to incorporate the 4DEE into their teaching. So I have a few leading questions, at least I hope they're leading questions here, that you'll be able to comment on. And I do want to get a good response from everybody in attendance here. So the first question that I want to throw out to the group is, as I mentioned, we have early adopters are excited about 4DEE. And we're trying to produce these teaching modules that other people can use. And so from an administrator's viewpoint, what changes do you see in curricular innovation that 4DEE addresses? Again, the idea here is that we have, we're doing curricular innovation all the time. And to what degree does 4DEE help to direct those innovations? And then to what degree can your innovations help to inform 4DEE? So I know that was a lot of me talking, and so I'm wondering whether others have then ideas about especially the way the 4DE can affect curricular innovation at your school and even nationwide. So the floor is now open to any and all. So maybe somebody who's familiar with 4DE wants to chime in and get the discussion going.
I
can do that. I have been an administrator for 17 years, along with being part of 4DE as an ecologist. And what was important to me in participating in this curricular framework development was that we would train our students to be ready for whatever careers were out there, not just one type of career, for a variety of careers. So the integration among dimensions, considering the real world problems created by human environment interactions, and then making sure that they have the hands-on techniques and the latest hands-on techniques in doing ecology that is part of the ecological practice. That was important. But putting things in perspective of what we already know about ecology, that's what employers of various types want the students who graduate to know. And every administrator, regardless of what level you're at, you want to be able to say your university does the best job in graduating students in every discipline. That's what you strive for. And so this curriculum validates that concept, the idea that we need to train students to be career ready. And it allows professors to, work with what they know to get to a better point. So it can be used by administrators as a way of validating what their faculty already are doing well. And before, unless you have a professional society validating it, it's just your own opinion as an administrator. So this allows. So that's what I think is important about this curriculum from the administrative point of view.
Okay, thank you, Carmen.
I'll add to that. Good morning, everybody. My name is Diane. I'm with Nevada State. I serve as the Associate Dean of Engagement. I'm at a teaching university, so what I've witnessed of our faculty is that they're highly engaged in undergraduate research with their students. I think that this framework, only elevates that and helps faculty, like you were saying, Carmen. It gives just sort of a validation of, yes, this is what I should be doing, is preparing my students for the workforce. I spent 21 years in the community college system, so that's all I know, is that you must prepare students to go directly into the workplace after 2 years. So coming here, I've been impressed to see that faculty have been very engaged in that opportunity, and to see that this curriculum helps that, especially with this new generation. Generation Z is very entrepreneurial. They're the most diverse group of students that we've had thus far, and they care about their community. They want to be able to give back to the community. They see an opportunity to go into education of, how am I going to help my community? They don't see it as, oh, this is my next natural step, I have to do this. They see it as, how is this going to help me make things better for myself, my family, and my peers. So this is an excellent way to do that. And I appreciate that you all have developed this and provide resources to faculty to do this. So thank you.
Great.
So
Other comments?
I can, would you like me to chime in too, maybe?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, great. So I'm a dean for natural science and mathematics, and so I'm a little far afield of the actual department, our biology department. Sarah's here. Hi, Sarah. Who is involved in this. I do see the potential impact for things like for skills that students can use once they leave the institution. But I also see in terms of our assessment processes that this framework is important as well. As a biology department with a biology degree, one of the things I think that the department noted early on was that students' scores in areas of ecology weren't as high as other discipline areas like cell biology, etc. So I see that this sort of framework and teaching ecology in this way may help to sort of even that out at least a little bit, so that our students are getting a well-rounded ecological education as well. So I can see where it might be important for assessment.
Okay, excellent, excellent. All
Can
right.
I ask a question? I'm sorry. I just want to ask a
ahead,
question
please.
very quickly. I was reading some of the articles on the ESA website about the 4DE framework. And it did mention about preparing students for the workforce. Is there an element in the framework, and I may have missed it, that helps students translate the skills that they're learning to put that as a marketable skill in their resume? Because that's one of the things that students struggle with, even after, as I mentioned, the lifetime I spent in community colleges. After 2 years, you know, you're still very relatively inexperienced. After your 4 years, what I'm finding is that some students are still not experienced in explaining what their background is in and how they can help their organization that they're applying for.
Let me see if Carmen, who speaks very eloquently about that aspect, I wonder if she wants to jump in and take a stab at it.
I don't think we've detailed that component, except that we actually, you know, make it intentional that students understand, why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we connecting these dimensions across? And that's because in order to understand how nature operates, and you want to make changes or manage the environment, that you need to know these interactions. And so, and because today's problems deal with these various types of integrations that we're not used to doing. In biology, we tend to just teach one thing at a time and ignore the connections to the rest of the world. So we are teaching them to do that. We're saying, why is that? But we haven't translated like, oh, I know how to do this skill in a resume way. But that's a great idea of, you know, how to use the framework to lead to a transcript approach to your skills. And that's happening in a lot of disciplines where, you know, you're trying to make it translatable to a resume. I had a question sort of related to this is in terms of the administrators, because I see those of you who are here today care about these issues a lot. And others may say, well, the faculty, if they want to do it, they can always do whatever they want to do. I don't have to get involved. But that's not the case. You really do have to get involved to support that extra work. So I wondered how the faculty are doing that. You know, those who care will do it regardless. Others who don't care? How will they be encouraged to allow the faculty to do this extra work for 4DE implementation?
Maybe I can join the conversation at this point too. I think, Diane, what you're saying also suggests that there is a role for faculty to help make that translation for the students, in the sense that, right, where faculty are not, well, today, you're not only just teaching concepts and ideas, it needs to be tied to where they're going to go, the next step, right? And particularly then, that translates into, okay, so what do they say about themselves, and what can they do, and what do they know, right, for their potential prospective employers. So I think that's an interesting question, and I'm not sure if people in this room agree that faculty have that responsibility or that role, or what is how do we perhaps work with the career advising departments, right, or other types of career counselors or whoever is in this area. So yeah, I would be curious to find out what do you all think should be or could be ways forward on this, because I think it is really important.
All right, if I could just jump in real quick on this. If you go to our digital library, the ESA is a digital library of education materials, and now many of them are focused in on 4DEE. The digital library is EcoEd, DL, and so one of the early resources that we put in, that I put in on EcoEd, is a whole module on wetlands. And we've done this because wetlands are a big thing that students who are ecologically literate will at least know about. And again, it's actually a good source of employment for students who want to get out in the field, and students who really want to make a difference. And so I think that by having resources like the resource that we have on wetlands, and I can steer you to that if you're at all interested. I think that that's a good example of the relationship between career preparation and 4DEE.
And I think, what administrators would want is some sort of value-added component to this curriculum that is clear to the students, so that they can talk about it and say, well, I've been through this. It's sort of like, quality improvement training or some other kind of training. I've been through this, and now I can do this. And it may be that becomes sort of a little webpage on the value added of being through this kind of curriculum for the student. Because the faculty may recognize it, but how can the student translate it? And the students say whatever we say, if they pay attention to us. So we have to sort of guide them into explaining what they already know, or talking about what they've learned in interviews, because employers will ask them, so, why is your career training so well suited to today's environment?
All right, so related to this, then we actually have three leading questions that were put together, and so I think this is actually leading to the third question. And so our third question is, what do you see as the greatest utility of the 4DE framework that aligns with your institution's workforce development strategy? And I really want to hear from some of the other administrators who haven't spoken up yet. But again, aligning 4DEE helps you align your institution's workforce strategy here. Doesn't it? How does that all work for you? Don't be shy.
I might jump in because I have a unique perspective. So I run our undergraduate research programming. I'm an ecologist, so I am able to teach. I might be a little bit biased as an ecologist because I think it's one of the greatest subjects in connecting students to these skills that we're talking. So we're talking about skill sets, right? And then workforce development, but really that's skills, and that's critical thinking skills. So we're using a better teaching paradigm to help them connect to the material to then become critical thinkers and all of these things that underscore a lot of other career paths. So I don't know, that was just my thoughts, is like I like using, and I'm also participating in the 4DEE cohort to kind of change up some of be more intentional. So it's kind of incorporating it without formalizing or knowing really about it. And so speaking to that, my students, I'm in a very rural area. And so the things that I was using in the past to connect them with materials, like my own personal research, didn't always resonate. And so I realized like I'm going to have to vary how I'm connecting these things and do more research about my students to find the things that they care about. So from that, I've seen the value. Another thing kind of from the administrative side is we now have a license to Lightcast, which tells us regional workforce data. And instead of defining specific roles or jobs or companies, you can look through skills. And so we've used that a lot in proposal development and identifying areas that our students might be lacking in terms of soft skills. So I think all of that to say it's a good tool for interdisciplinary and for training, 21st century problem thinkers to go into the world. And I don't know that like identifying one specific career path is the most important. I think it's creating members of society that are going to contribute and think and be able to serve their families and hopefully become educators and lifelong learners as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. That was wonderful. Other thoughts?
Yeah. So
George?
I want to make a couple comments just from my own perspective at teaching at a historically Black school for 40 years. And that is that most of my students weren't interested in ecology at all. Biology has the largest major group in the university. Right now, there are about 1,200 majors. Political science is next with 1,000. So biology has a lot of majors. Not all of them are going to become doctors. Real doctors. And so one of the things that we have to do is prepare students for alternative careers when they decide they're not going to be a real doctor. And one of the ways you do that is to expose them to alternative careers. But most of those alternative careers, ecology included, are ones in which my students were woefully underrepresented. And so they didn't see a cohort out there. They didn't see mentors and models who looked like them. And so the idea of getting them interested in a field in which they weren't represented was a difficult task. So one of the things that we had to do and are still doing is trying to figure out how to reach the students. And you reach the students by going to them and asking them, what are they interested in? And they are very interested in issues of environmental justice and disparate impacts on their community and paying back to their community. And then you ask them, well, what are the things that are affecting their communities? And it turns out that in most of their communities, the things that are affecting them are environmental issues, whether it be pollution or floods or low-lying areas or bad exposures or, you name it. We've all read through the list. So then you use that. And my students, the generation that's around right now are asking they don't want to learn science for science's sake. They want to learn science to do things with science. And so the question then is not only just doing science, but where and how do you use the information that you garner from that science? And that's what 4DEE does, is it teaches students how to operate across and outside their discipline, use the information they've gathered, use the skills that they've learned to answer and ask questions that inform public policy and inform and make decisions that affect their lives and their community. And so from the student perspective, 4DEE is a really, really, really strong way to approach the subject and discipline area. And so it's been very useful from that perspective. And secondarily, it exposes them to all these alternative careers, whether they use ecology as just as an ecologist, or whether they go on and become a lawyer or a doctor who uses ecological information. All of this has been very useful, and it tends to get them very excited about problems. And so we've found and grown, and now have just established this year a Department of Environmental Studies, which was woefully lacking for almost 30 years. So, and that was because of student demand and student interest that had generated the new department. Because of using this 4DEE approach, it allowed students to kind of pick and choose and help change the curriculum to address their interests. I'll stop there. I could go on.
I'm sure glad we're recording this session, because these are profound words that everybody is providing us. So other thoughts, especially related to what George said or others have said.
I think it's important that to recognize that if students are doing a major in something that is in their interest that they've already expressed, that they're going to, tell others about the fact that this university is able to allow you to major in something that is real world connecting today for students. And ultimately, the university can use these testimonials to attract other students to whatever department is involved in the teaching of 4DE. And that is something that administrators do want, to be able to attract more students. Otherwise, you're losing students who don't want to be medical doctors, but don't know where else to go. And now they have a department, in this case, a department in environmental studies. It could be a totally new major that is focusing only on environmental problem solving. And every university has a different way of leading to that. So that's why I was wondering about other people. How easy is it to change curriculum to facilitate faculty who are interested in this new curriculum?
Okay, I don't know administrators to be shy, so
I can offer a few thoughts. So there's different ways, right? And I think that this is more of a culture. So I'm hoping that this will be helpful insight. We have community engaged courses, so you can ace your courses. I know many of us have cures or course-based undergraduate research courses. So that's one avenue that you can not have to redesign, a brand new course and have it pass through curriculum. But I also think the faculty that I engage with that are very interdisciplinary and kind of follow a similar ecological 4DE framework, they're already doing this just naturally, it already came to them. Right. And so we're talking about a formal process, and that's what this helps. But I think it's also just a culture. But as far as curriculum development, I think the buy-in, can be small, and that can trickle without having to do a major overhaul. Although I think we're learning to become more agile as workforce needs and higher ed, what the world needs from higher ed is changing, right? We're going to have to be nimble in order to address that. And so something like this and being able to incorporate this quickly in a very formalized way, I don't know, but I do think that the buy-in, there's other ways to infuse it.
Okay. So one of the things that we talked about was the idea, and we talked a lot about 4DE and how it relates to workforce development. Certainly, there are a lot of schools who put a lot of emphasis on getting their undergrads into grad school. And so a question would be, and maybe for those of you who are at schools that do both undergrad and grad education, does 4DEE, well, let me put it in the form of a statement. We would say that 4DE not only provides a better skill set for students to go into the workforce, we think that it provides also a better skill set for students to get into and excel in graduate school. All right. And so I don't know if anybody wants to support or refute that notion, but in terms of grad school, how does 4DE intersect with that?
So I think that this approach increases self-efficacy. And so students, when you're using this approach and you're having them connect and applying this to their life, they become ecologists and self-identify that way earlier. And so I think through doing that, it builds confidence. And then as a result, students are better prepared and more resilient going into graduate programs.
Other thoughts?
And to that extent, it's really important to make the student aware of that what they're doing is increasing their self-efficacy. It is actually doing so, but they may not recognize that what they're doing has more value than just making it fun and engaging for them. So the faculty have to be involved in making students recognize how they are improving as, ecologists throughout this process.
Okay, well, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
I really value that Carmen keeps coming back to language. So for instance, like on our national survey for student engagement, there were some questions that we weren't getting, like students weren't providing feedback, but it's because they don't know what high impact practices are, right? And so if we're not telling our students what they're doing, and I think that is really the formal aspect of this curriculum change, more than anything is ensuring that we are connecting it for them in a very meaningful dialogue way that they can then express. So for example, I tell my students as soon as they end the course, you're all ecologists now, go out and change the world, right? Or you can now do this or that. You can wear all the hats. Like, you don't need somebody to tell you that. Once you go through the process of inquiry and generating new knowledge and then formalizing it, like, you are now that. And so I think that language is really important. And maybe that is, a piece of this 4DE that has to be intentional throughout, for it to connect back to the workforce development, for them to self-identify skills, and then for succeeding in grad school.
Okay, so one of the comments I saw in the chat was made by Sam Donovan, and I think that what he said is relatable to what we've been talking about. He talked about the idea of having student activities that lead to products that students could share as part of their portfolio. And certainly when students apply to grad school, or, if they apply to a job as well, they want to show the employer, this is what I've done, this is what we could, the experience that I bring to the table here. So I wonder if Sam might want to, I hope he's still on the line here, if Sam wants to expand on his thinking behind that comment that he made.
I can, thanks. I don't really have much more to say about that. I was trying to think of ways to capture the outcomes of adopting 4DE at the student level. So I don't know if there are plans to have accreditation kinds of standards for people using the curriculum so that they're meeting particular targets or goals within the framework. But the idea of using realistic audiences and doing work that produces products that have a public life beyond just the classroom environment, I think can be a strong motivator for students. Again, I apologize, I'm not an administrator. I'm part of an education nonprofit that's very interested in promoting reform. And for us, it's about making it visible, making it accessible, and being there for the long term so that as people adopt the practices, they have support. And I think the other challenge, I'll just throw this in since I'm on, I think another challenge is that many ecologists are isolated at their institutions, right? If you're talking two-year schools or smaller colleges, maybe you've got one or two ecologists. And so I think the building of cross-institutional teams for that support system to go through the hard work of adoption of the curriculum and building new materials is essential. And so I'm glad to hear that you're doing that.
Okay, well, Sam, while we have you on the line here, you want to say a couple words about BioQuest and maybe how 4DEE can relate to BioQuest a little bit more explicitly than we might have already. I know I asked you this question in a different forum, but now I'm going to put you on the spot here and relate it if you can.
Yeah, no problem. The briefest of histories, BioQuest is a consortium of faculty, primarily biologists, but we're now really getting a lot of chemists and some physics folks involved. It's been around for 35 years, started by a fellow named John Junk at Beloit College. And the emphasis has been on the use of computational tools to support realistic science activities for students. And over 35 years, the sort of strategies and mission have shifted some, but most recently we had some significant funding from NSF to establish the CUBES project, which is quantitative undergraduate biology education and synthesis, focusing on getting computational work and statistical reasoning throughout the biology curriculum. And I would just tell you that the ecologists were ready to go. You guys were already using the tools, already teaching statistics, using programs like R. And so much of the work in that project focused on ecological topics because of the community was ready to go. And so CUBES lives on now, managed by the BioQuest nonprofit, as a digital library of materials and community space for projects to collaborate and share their work. And so the correlation between the types of educational goals in the 4DE align absolutely with BioQuest. It's meant to be authentic learning. It's meant to be iterative. It's of course not content centric, but using the content to solve problems. And so there's a great deal of potential synergy there.
Thank you.
Actually, I'd like to jump in there to say that CUBES is a great partner of the 4DE project. All our faculty mentoring networks are hosted by the CUBES Hub website. And so the infrastructure. So thanks, Sam. And I guess I should also at this point acknowledge the many people who have contributed to this project, right? It's not just this, well, you've met the 4DE subcommittee and then the steering committee, but there's a whole bunch of other folks. I'm going to put that in the chat here. People who will not fit in my little bitty slide there, but there are lots of people who have been involved in all kinds of working groups and and groups like CUBES Hub, that's been supporting the project. So this is definitely a community effort. Yeah.
Okay, other comments or thoughts? We're changing the world here, so there should be there should be a lot of thoughts relating to this.
And one last comment, and that is to mention the fact that a lot of the effort that's gone in has focused on ecology, but in more recent times, there's been some expansion of thought in terms of how does this human environment dimension play out in other STEM areas and other disciplines, other fields. And so the idea here is that, while we focus the development of 4DEE on teaching ecology courses and training ecologists writ large, much of what can be used and learned from this effort can be applied to other disciplines in, for instance, chemistry or physics or environmental studies or gosh, even some of the humanities and social sciences might benefit from considering or reconsidering how to cross dimensional boundaries that traditionally are used to focus the attention and curricular of their courses and disciplines. So I find this to be particularly exciting because I think what it does is then it allows administrators to not just focus on ecology per se, but perhaps to focus more largely on the whole department of biology and ask the faculty and students to think about how does what you're doing and learning relate to larger questions and get used in the development of public policy elsewhere, and how does it cross disciplinary boundaries. And so I think this holds great interest for future development.
Okay, so you actually took my back pocket question and and made it into a topic here, which is a great topic. And so that being that we do have some some people who are not necessarily ecologists who are in the room and maybe not even biologists, what do you see as the potential for 4DEE being something more than strictly ecological?
Well, I can, so I'm an earth science, geoscience educator. And I think the 4DE model resonates with research in, teaching across multiple disciplines. It's a lot of common threads. For example, the K-12 next generation science standards are three-dimensional and in ways that resonate very well with the dimensions of 4DEE. So I think looking for those synergies, I guess, between research and in teaching disciplinary in other disciplines, and not just the sciences, but across disciplines, which I think ecology inherently is better at interdisciplinarity than a lot of other things because of the nature of ecology, of the interaction of systems and building systems thinking. And I think bringing that to other disciplines has real value, but I also think that it's got an awful lot of similarity with research that's been done in teaching in other disciplines.
Don, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Don Haas. I'm the Director of Teacher Programming at the Paleontological Research Institution in Ithaca, which has a natural history museum and a nature center. I'm also a past president of the National Association of Geoscience Teachers and have been working with Ken on energy related stuff for like 12 years now or something like that, maybe a little longer than that. And I'm currently working on an article with Ken and Carmen where they're doing the heavy lifting because I've been busy. And I'm a former professor of science education as well as a former high school teacher.
And you've won numerous awards, but we're not going to get into that. Okay, so I think we want to wrap up a little bit here, and so I guess a question that we can ask is how 4DEE can be helpful to your departments or being able to further support your faculty. We're trying to create a large community here, and we want to be able to support you. And whether you as an individual faculty member or a whole department or even a school, what can we do to help you with that? And we'll let it open it up here. Okay, well, I guess we're all engaged in very thoughtful reflection on this particular question. Certainly, if you have thoughts, there are a number of people that you could email or let people know what your thoughts are. Again, you could go to the 4DEE webpage that ESA has produced, a fairly elaborate webpage on this. Email Teresa, email me, or Carmen, or George, or others, who've worked on this. I don't know. Last comments here.
I just want to thank everybody for being here, and especially to Ken for your efforts from day one of this whole project, and George, my co-PI, also from day one of the TEE project. I see some of the faculty here who are very involved. Sarah, Zakia, you all are just awesome. So it's great to see, so many people, and Carmen too was, from day one on the project. So these are our instigators here, and continuing to be involved and engaged, even though they're retired. So anyway, yeah. But I think this has been a great conversation. You've given us quite a bit to think about. So I just want to say my thanks and hand it over back to Ken and Jessica. Yeah.
Okay. So I know that my school's on fall break right now, and not that it matters to me because I'm retired in San Diego. But again, this will give you more opportunity to think about things. And we're always open for comments. We're open for ideas of how to make this work. We would like to see ecologists adopt this nationwide, if not worldwide. And then, as we talked about toward the end here, just the whole idea of broadening this out and not including just ecology, but other sciences and maybe even some non-sciences as well. We just see that there's lots of opportunities to get students to think about how to teach and learn in multiple dimensions. And so that's really the fundamental point here: how to teach and learn in multiple dimensions.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Ken. Thank you so much for leading the discussion today, and thank you to Teresa, Chris, anybody who's been involved in 4DE that's helping us carry this initiative through, and for the administrators who have attended, who have helped us wrap our head around the challenges as we push forward. And hopefully we continue to broaden our network and strengthen the 4DE framework in institutions across the US and beyond. So thank you for your time, and have an excellent day.